Hello, everybody. It's your old friend Gary Lucas, and it's Saturday, January 16th, 2021. Here we're plunging pell-mell into the future and hopefully a brighter year than the last one. And yesterday happened to be what would have been the 80th birthday of my great friend, inspiration, and mentor, Don Van Vliet, a.k.a. Captain Beefheart. And I wrote up a very lengthy, chock full of detail account about some experiences I had with Don and the great Frank Zappa, which you can read at pleasekillme.com. That's a very, very cool website that has really many, many articles of interest about music, especially the hidden corners thereof, pop culture, B movies, all sorts of good stuff, outsider art. They really do cover the waterfront, so check them out. But while you're there, please read this article if you have any interest in Zappa or Beefheart or Southern California musical oddities, of which I had an up close and personal ringside seat for several years too, being based in New York all these years. I do love the West Coast, and my mom and dad moved out there, so I visited there over the years many times and recorded out there, and find a lot of the pleasant, meteorological aspects ultra congenial. But anyway, it was there in outside LA and inside LA. I had some amazing adventures with Don Van Vliet. I can't begin to tell you. I mean, they would fill a couple of books. And every day I knew him and I was with him or talked to him, he would say or do some amazing thing, some remarkable thing. He was truly, to me, the most gifted artist I knew. And I've never met anybody remotely like him in all these years. And I've worked with a lot of the greats, as you know. I mean, I have a lengthy CV, and a lot of it includes some big name artists. You could go to Wikipedia or my website to review the list. I don't know, and I would like to add everybody I've ever worked with on the list because I think you're all great, and thank you for playing with me and vice versa. But on the subject at hand of Beefheart, I was gonna play a little bit. I had a request for Evening Bell, which is, if you know the work, it's a solo guitar showcase piece Don gave me. He composed it on piano, and it occurs on the final Beefheart album. What was to be the final? We didn't know it was the final Beefheart album when we recorded this in 1982. The album Ice Cream for Crow, and it definitely. I still play it often in solo concerts, but in trying to prepare for the show, I did not think that the output of my guitar amp is really sufficient to communicate it so spectacularly as far as the sonics go. I have had some issues, and I mean to replace it. I haven't gotten around to it, though. I've been kind of preoccupied with the current climate, the ongoing situation as it is, communicated mainly through my favorite news networks, CNN and MSNBC. I look at Fox News from time to time, but I just don't quite cotton to the BS there. Sorry. So, I mean, you don't have to agree with my politics to enjoy Don Van Vliet's music. And in fact, as I recall, there was an interesting right-wing Republican candidate who was one of the 20 very odd people, at least 20, who threw their hats in the ring in the period where Trump was first running in 2015. And I forget the name of this fellow, but as part of his credentials, he burnished the fact that he was a big Captain Beefheart fan, which was, not enough reason for me to want to support him because I thought his politics were odious. Nevertheless, I can tell you Don was mainly, very, very mainly much on the left side of the political spectrum. All those rugged individualists out there, and there are many in California verging on militia-type members, should pay heed to that because he was of the opposite. And I have pictures, too, somewhere I should post someday on one of my visits out there with my first wife, Ling, because it was right during the frenzy about the vis-a-vis the Iraq war. And actually, no. I'm talking about the early 80s after there was a seizure by Iranian militants and hostage taking, if you can cast your mind back to that. And he lived in Lancaster, California, and the streets around Lancaster were strewn with handwritten posters, Iranians go home, a lot of jingoistic, nationalistic, Arab baiting going on there. I mean, I have to say, Lancaster is a beautiful town, but it is a hotbed of pretty much predominant right-wing thinking. But I don't want to talk about politics here, but Don was opposed to that. He was also not a big fan of Margaret Thatcher, from a UK fan. And in several concerts that we gave in 80, he said, Reagan and Thatcher are doing a dance. He was down on Reagan. He would say, I hope I don't get Reagan face. He said, Reagan looks like a bat because of the way his underarm skin would droop down between his shoulder blades, stuff like that. So anyway, since I can't play Evening Bell on the guitar, I thought I'd do a little snatch of it acoustically, because it sounds pretty good. I was like trying it out here on my 1941 J45, so... like that. I think it sounds pretty good, except if I go up into the upper register, which I have to do in this song, I can't really fret it like I could on electric. So you'll have to bear with me, because the rest of the set is going to be done acoustically. But the great beauty of Don's music is that it lends itself to both electric and acoustic modes of playing. And I've heard it arranged for symphony orchestra. I did a concert with my old friend Code de Kloot, who is the Zappa Beefheart go-to guy of Holland. And he hooked me up with a 65-piece Metropole Orchestra in Amsterdam several years ago, where we did, essentially symphonic Beefheart. He got some young arrangers, and there are many great gifted young Dutch musicians and composers I've worked with. And these arrangers were more or less under the spell of Maria Schneider. You jazz people will know who I'm talking about here. It was kind of a disciple of Gil Evans. And they did very, very imaginative symphonic arrangements of a lot of the Beefheart oeuvre. And I held down the guitar chair. And actually on this 40-year retrospective album, here comes the commercial, coming out, The Essential Gary Lucas, January 29th on Knitting Factory. It's a double CD. There's a track from that concert of me playing Evening Bell live with the symphony orchestra. In other words, an arrangement was made, and it's very imaginative, kind of orchestral sparkle going on underneath me playing the piece. And so, for the record, the piece was one of Don's through-composed piano pieces. Don Van Vliet had three major means of communicating his music and teaching his band his music. One was by example, where he would get on the various instruments of the band and just sort of play out his ideas. Even down to once while I was making ice cream for a crow, and he was teaching us a song called Ink Mathematics, which is a really good one, little ode to quantum math, as Don would say. He sang a chord to me, which I attempted to play, and then he literally walked over to me, picked up one of my fingers off the fretboard of the guitar and put it on another note, and said, yeah, that's it. In other words, he would do real-time exercises in physical manipulation of the musicians playing his music to further smear these chords or fuck them up. I mean, to be frank with you, to achieve a certain amount of dissonance that might not have been the original chord as he played it on piano, for instance, that you might have learned, but to further, you know, I guess enhance it. You know, Don loved dissonance, as do I. And I've gone into a lot of his other methodologies, but I'll reiterate. He was a champion whistler. This guy, if there was a contest to whistle all the birdsong in the universe, and I mean, this has been the foundation of many a great composer, including Olivier Messiaen, who based a lot of his early compositions. He's a French avant-garde composer. Messiaen based many of his compositions on birdsong, in trying to emulate it, notate it out, and capture it. He was also very religious in his orientation. I wouldn't say the same thing about Don, or at least he didn't talk about it that much. But the third method, which was also a good way to learn his music, was he would sit at a piano and do what is called through composing. In other words, he would improvise a piece, although if you asked him, he'd say, there are no accidents, there are no mistakes. I intended to play it exactly the way I played it. Fair enough, as Allen Ginsberg once remarked, first thought, best thought. So he would sit down, he would turn on his cassette recorder, and he would improvise a piece. He would get into little grooves. It's amazing to hear the piano pieces and how they progress with ideas. And then without any editing, he would copy the piece and send it to you and say, learn this on your instrument, or learn this on guitar, in my case. And as I mentioned in the article, I would say, well, wait, you're using all 10 fingers, and there's only 6 strings on a guitar. And he very wryly would say, you better find another 4, man. You see, Don sort of like putting the band on existential snipe hunts. I don't know if you know about a snipe hunt, but it's where you send young people off in the woods to kind of locate and capture, maybe, or discover a mythical creature, the snipe. But of course, this creature doesn't exist. So we did a lot of chasing around, after Don's Will-O-the-Wisp, let's say, in the run-up to codifying these compositions before recording them. And I met Johnny Depp a few years ago. I walked into, this is a good story. I walked into Matt Umanoff Guitars, which is now closed except on special occasions. They're still selling guitars there. That's a venerable guitar shop on Bleecker Street, my local, along with Carmine Street Guitars, which I definitely recommend you to. Go say hi to Rick Kelly if you go to Carmine Street. And I was there, I went in there from time to time basically to buy strings. I am not really a collector of guitars. I don't have the space, and I think guitars should be played. And to just warehouse them without naming any names, it's great if you have the luxury of being able to do it, but just think of like what you're, taking off the market, or, sort of not accessing or having other people able to access some of these beautiful instruments. That seems not so good, but I mean, if, as they say, if you got money, you can travel. And I'm in there, and all of a sudden, this fellow walked in the door with a couple of bodyguards. And I looked at him, and it crossed my mind. I said, that looks like Johnny Depp, but I'm not sure. And he wore a big hat, not so dissimilar to my hat. And he had a mustache and goatee. But at the same time, I said, well, maybe it's Kid Rock. Kid Rock had a similar look at that time. Maybe it's Snoopy, the old prospector. I don't know. I often thought that when Schultz did his Snoopy, the old prospector in the desert, it was a Van Vliet caricature. But that's mere speculation on my part. Anyway, Matt came over and he said, hang around, Gary, I'll introduce you. Okay, stick around. So I kind of moseyed down to the back of the store to observe this. I saw my friend Zeke, who used to work there, and I said, Zeke, who is that? And he just looked, he opened his eyes like, oh, voices carry. He didn't want to embarrass himself by telling me, and the fool that I was who couldn't identify this person. So they were running up and down the stairs to the basement to secure some beautiful, rare axes for this mysterious figure to play. And he was actually pretty good. He was doing some blues bottleneck acoustic playing. And after a while, I got bored with this, so I went to leave. I took my coat. I had it hung over a display case. I put it on. So Matt saw me leaving. He said, Gary, let me introduce you. And he motions me over. And he said, this is Gary Lucas, great guitarist, Captain Beefheart, Jeff Buckley. And this other guy thrust his hand out. I'm looking up. He was a tall dude. And I didn't want to make a fool of myself. I didn't want to sound like an asshole. So I said, and you are, because no one had introduced us, honestly. And he looked shocked, like, I'm one of the most famous motherfuckers in the world. And I said, and you are, I was trying to help him. And he goes, well, it's Ja. He got that part out. And I said, Johnny Depp, I love you. I love your acting. I loved you in Roman Polanski's Ninth Gate. And he came alive and he went, Polanski. And then we, fell into it. So he said, I want to know, Tom Waits and I ask each other, what is it about Beefheart that you have all of this, there's a kind of frantic sound on a lot of the music, especially the mid-period Trout Mask era. And I said, well, really, I'll tell you, that's because he used to holler at us a lot, honestly, quite honestly, right before we'd go in to record. He loved to sort of set up attention and keep us off balance by, going off maybe on somebody or complaining about something. I mean, now it's like funny. But back then it was serious because we all wanted to do our best. Once the recording light switched on, we saw that red light. But he would make enormous changes on some of the music at the last minute, as they say. So that helped keep us off balance, but he liked the sound of that tension in the music. He hated anything that sounded slack or too laid back. So, anyway, I thought you would enjoy that. We had another conversation about this and that, and it was nice to know Johnny Depp is a Beefheart fan, and I should have included him along with Jack White in this article as a list of people who admire Don Van Vliet's artistry, of which there are many. I mean, I didn't mention it, but both John Lennon and George Harrison had Safe as Milk bumper stickers, which came away free from the original album, up on walls in their various abodes in Esher and outside London in the summer of '67. Now, John Peel, God bless him, the great English DJ, tastemaker, who was a huge champion of punk and indie music, who actually played my music on his last two shows before he passed away. John Peel had circulated the word on Beefheart in the UK, along with another guy over there, Pete Meaden, who was considered the original mod. In fact, he was a friend of Pete Townsend's. And if you know the old Who records, I'm the Face, Baby Is That Clear, is a song about Pete Meaden. And my friend Andrew Lou Goldham, the Rolling Stones producer and raconteur, memoirist, was friends with Pete, and they produced some shows together, including Peter and Gordon when it was known as Gordon and Peter. But I digress. Anyway, Pete Meaden and John Peel were instrumental in really lighting the fire for Beefheart in the UK. And I guess the Beatles picked up on the vibe. Also, it helped that Derek Taylor, who was the Beatles' publicist early on, after he relocated to L.A., was hired to do the promotion on Safe as Milk. So it could have been him who distributed the album with the bumper sticker. But I tell you, both those Beatles had them up on their wall, so they must have liked something about that record, okay? All right, so I'm going to take a break from storytelling time. I know you want to hear some more guitar. I got some more for you. But okay, there are two Beefheart-related tracks on this album, The Essential Gary Lucas, and one is Evening Bell, the symphonic Evening Bell, which is awesome, if I do say so. Thank you, Coda Clute. And check out Co's book, Frank and Me, and me and Frank. I have a copy somewhere here. Let's see. Sorry, Frank and Co. Yeah, is the title, and you can get it from, I think it's codeclute.com. Anyway, he's got websites, and you can find it. It's really good. It's got a lot of rare pictures of Frank and Beefheart stories, and a transcript of a thing I did with him called I Have a Cat, taking the last long interview with Don Van Vliet before Don got seriously ill with multiple sclerosis. He took a phone conversation of an hour or so's length and had me set it to music with him, and we performed it a few times at the Zappanale in Bad Doberan, Germany, and at the BIM House in Amsterdam. And I think I've got it posted on my on my SoundCloud page. Anyway, check it out. It is available for download through OK Music. And other things I've been listening to, I wanted to tell you about. Here's the Third Air Band's music from Macbeth. There's a remastered version with 3 extra tracks they found in a tape library from the soundtrack, and it's my friend Glenn Sweeney, the late Glenn Sweeney, was the prime mover percussionist in the Third Ear Band. They were simply an astonishing improvising ensemble who simultaneously made modern and medieval music and just, pulled it out of the ether and put people in trances. They played at Hyde Park, for instance, and some very big shows and hypnotized everybody. And when they hooked up with Polanski for Macbeth, I think it was possibly the most synergistic conjunction of musicians and composers and the auteur director, Polanski. And that is one of my favorite films, too. I've seen it numerous times. I recommend the Blu-ray edition of Roman Polanski's Macbeth, and you can really hear how well that music works. Now, here's some books I've been reading. I just got a hold of this. It's a Signet first edition paperback of a great noir American classic of a dark carnival, kind of a hustler's convention, called Nightmare Alley, which I mentioned a couple of weeks ago. It's by William Lindsay Gresham, who should be better known. This book should be better known. There's a film with John Garfield, I think it is, playing a version of the lead character in there, but it's kind of tame. And now I learned that Guillermo del Toro has just wrapped a modern, updated version that will feature Bradley Cooper in the lead role and Willem Dafoe, my pal, and Cate Blanchett as the as a really seriously vicious psychiatrist, female psychiatrist. And last but not least, here I found the first paperback edition of the English translation. Who's this translator? It's a fellow named Geoffrey Sainsbury, like the British Sainsbury's. It's a chain store in the UK. But this is Vertigo, which in French, it's 2 French authors, Pierre Boileau and Thomas Narcejac. And the original title is Entre des Morts, Between the Deaths, or Amidst the Deaths. It's got various translations in English, but this is one of my favorite films. I recently did a show here to try and establish a connection between the composer, Hitchcock's main guy you always think of when you think of Alfred Hitchcock scores of his great films, and that would be Bernard Herrmann. And the music is definitely touched by the influence of Richard Wagner, and I've made some musical discoveries. So check out that show, a couple of shows back. It's everything that I've done, it's up on YouTube, and it's there for you. They're hiding in plain sight for you to discover. So one of the last things I want to mention is I got so many stories about Don, so I don't know where to begin. But as far as my own development, I'll say this. He was not easy. When anybody in the group wanted to go and do their own thing, he would get very possessive. And he was disturbed by this. And I don't think that's right, actually. I mean, because unless you're paying somebody and put them on retainer for your exclusive services, particularly a creative artist, it's like, you can't really, in all fairness, expect them to just do your stuff if you're not paying them. And, he paid people a little bit every once in a while when he could. So, but, people got restless. They wanted to work in other situations. I get it. I did also. But at the point that I worked with him, I was content to just do his music. But other band members did, and then they found that they weren't invited on the next album sessions and like that. He was a mercurial guy. But as far as his influence on me as a guitarist, I'd say it's vast. Because to learn his pieces, which were incredibly complicated, I had to extend my technique. I had to really stretch my fingers, and I have pretty long fingers as it is. I had to just sort of invent a new technique in order to achieve what he wanted me to do. And I think it was worth the struggle, because it sure was a struggle. I would get up every morning. I had a day job at CBS Records writing ad copy for all sorts of terrible groups. A couple times, some fun ones, good ones. But by and large, I didn't much care for their music. Sorry. And, for me, it was an exercise. It was like a Buddhist mantra. I'd get there and I'd say, I have to learn at least 2 bars of the music today. So from like 6 a.m. to 8, when I'd have to then get ready to leave, to get up to Black Rock in Midtown, I'd be focused on the tapes he'd sent me. Now, how can I play this on the guitar? Where are these notes on the guitar? And I never notated it out either. I'm not like big on that. I memorized it as I went along. So I simultaneously got really much more agile on the fretboard, and it pointed me in directions of improvisation, to tell you the truth, that I might never have thought of. And at the same time, it sharpened my memory. Because at one point, I had these things down to a T, and I could just reel them off. Now, the more difficult ones, I have to put some time in to kind of to go over those neurons, which have, I wouldn't say they shorted out, but let's say they haven't been exercised in a long time, and you need to constantly refresh yourself. And I'll add with one thing here. I'm a fan of many different figures culturally, artists, philosophers. And one of the best things I ever read was in a book by Schopenhauer, who was a pessimistic philosopher, German guy in the 19th century, who wrote several really good books. One is called The World as Will and Idea. Another one is called Aphorisms. One of his aphorisms is that if you forget something, and you have to, you cannot produce the memory of what the answer to the question, whatever you're trying to communicate to somebody else, if they ask you a question and you can't recall this memory, you should not look it up. Now we can go to the internet and type in a few phrases, and the whole universe of knowledge, the Ummah, the undermind, is called up at a moment's notice. He didn't think that was a good thing, but of course, this was pre-internet. He said, what you have to do is just force yourself to remember. Just take the time and concentrate, and eventually the answer will bubble up. And I found that to be true. And he thought this was quite a good exercise to keep people mentally alert. Now, no one is a pillar of strength or a gladiator perpetually out there. I mean, no matter how hard they try and exercise and maintain their svelte figure, as Big Joe Turner said, you're so beautiful, but you got to die someday. So we're all of us undergoing these changes the older we get, and we're all growing at the same rate. So, you have to take in mind the heat death of the universe, entropic decay going on. But I think that, thanks to working with Tom, my memory is still pretty sharp. And I can remember many, many incidents with him with total clarity, whereas I couldn't tell you what I had for lunch yesterday. All right, so anyway, to conclude. So Evening Bell is in drop D. This piece, In a Forest, it's original to me. I wrote it in, I think it was Eisenach, Germany, or Erfurt, Germany, on a tour. I was really inspired that evening, and with nothing better to do in the hotel and play my guitar, that emerged. And when I got back from one of those tours, I think I had been playing in Holland, on my electric guitar, I had it set up in the drop D position, which is open to, it's a regular standard tuning on the guitar in fifths, going from the low string E to A to D to G to B to E again. Or is this fourth? Fourths. Sorry. And anyway, it was tuned down here, the low string, to where it is now. So this is that tuning. And in passing my fingers over the strings, I had to get busy to write music for Jeff Buckley, which was my next port of call project on the horizon. And I kept it in that tuning. I didn't even think to retune it. And passing over those notes, I arrived at this. So that is the secret connection between Captain Beefheart and Jeff Buckley. And I have to say, Jeff was a big, big fan of Don Van Vliet, Captain Beefheart, and happy 80th birthday, Don. And I really hope you're well. I loved you, man, and I will continue to spread the word about your artistry for as long as I'm still drawing breath. Thank you for listening and tuning in, you guys. And I'll see you on Tuesday, okay, at 3 o'clock. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. There is light at the end of the tunnel, somewhat. All right. Take care. Bye now.